Alrighty, so for today's math lesson, Unit 10, Lesson 4, we're working on rectangular arrays to represent sums of equal groups. So there's one new word that we are working with. It's this word array. Okay, our objective is today I will find the total number of objects in rectangular arrays by finding sums of equal groups. Okay, so let's start off with the definition of array. An array is an arrangement of objects in rows and columns. Well, you guys are familiar with rows and columns. Remember that rows go left and right. And so rows, like you're rowing a boat, go left and right. And the column, a column goes top to bottom or up and down. So remember, like a house or those old school buildings, the roof is often held up by these tall pillars called columns. These are the columns. They go up and down. Rows go left and right. Columns go up and down. Okay, keep those two. These are the two most important vocabulary words for our unit on multiplication, and it's going to be helpful moving forward into third grade. Very important. Third grade, right now you're learning about the fundamentals or the foundation, the basics of multiplication. When you get into third grade, it's going to be even more in depth. So to understand just the basics row and column, that's going to help you get very far. All right, so 3 steps for today's lesson. Number 1, you're going to read and decide if you're making rows or columns. So they're going to give you instructions, and they're going to tell you either to make a certain amount of rows or a certain amount of columns, okay? Then number 2, you're going to draw or use manipulatives. In this case, you're just going to draw them because you don't have manipulatives. If you do happen to have things at home that you can use, like counters, beans, beads, things like that, you can use those, but I still need to be able to see it so I can give you a grade because we're not in person. I would much rather you draw. So maybe you can do both if you want to or if you really need to. Okay. Step number 3 is count and write the total number of objects. All right. So let's get started. So step number one says to read and figure out whether we're drawing columns or rows, right? So here is number 1. It says create an array. So remember, an array is an arrangement of objects in rows and columns. So here is my array. It's an arrangement of rows left and right and columns up and down. Your objects are always organized in rows and columns when you're doing multiplication and making arrays. Okay, an array is not like this. That's not an array. Your arrays have to be organized in this way because it really just makes it easier either way. Okay, so they want us to draw an array, but number 1 says to create an array with 3 columns. Okay, 3 columns. Columns go up and down. So I know I need 3 of them. And I'm going to underline it so I can remember. 3 columns. Okay, step number 1, we're done. Step number 2, we're going to use manipulatives to show the correct number of rows or columns, in this case, columns. So I'm going to do 3 columns. They go up and down. 1, 2, 3. And as you get better, you're not going to need to draw in your columns or your rows. I'm just doing this now so we can get used to it, and then eventually you can take them away. So right now I did 3 up and down figures to represent my columns. And if I wanted to help me remember that they are columns, I'm going to draw on my roof of my house. Okay, then I'm going to place 4 manipulatives or objects in each column. So here's 1 column. They want me to put 4 manipulatives in each. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that first part is done. Next, we need to write an addition sentence or equation to show the sum of the numbers of objects in each column. In each of these columns represent 1 addend. Remember what an addend is, right? It's a number that we're adding together with other addends to equal a sum. Okay, so in each column I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So on each line I'm going to write 4. 4 plus 4 plus 4. 4 plus 4 plus 4 equals what? 12. Our sum is 12. Okay, then we're going to write an addition equation to show the sum of number of objects in each row. Okay, so we need to write this is our addition as sentence for our columns. 4 plus, oops, sorry. This sentence down here was an addition sentence for our columns. 4 plus 4 plus 4. Now, they want us to write an addition equation to show the sum of numbers of objects in each row. Well, remember, rows go left to right. So I'm going to take my pencil, I'm going to circle my objects in my rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And how much are in each row? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So I'm just going to take these numbers and plug them into my addition sentence down here. 3, see, plus 3, plus 3, plus 3 equals 12. The sums are the same, and it should be the same because we didn't add or take away any manipulatives or objects. We just added them differently. So this first equation was our columns, and this next equation was our rows. Okay, let's do it again. Problem number 2. Step number 1 says to read the equation. Figure out what you're drawing. Are you drawing columns or are you drawing rows? Okay, number 2 says create an array. Remember, that means an arrangement in rows and columns with 5 columns. Okay, there we go. 5 columns. Then they want us to place 3 manipulatives in each column. Okay, so what are we drawing first? 5 columns. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to draw my roof. Okay. Then I'm going to place 3 manipulatives in each column. So in my columns, I'm going to have 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Then we need to write an addition equation to show the number of the sum of the number of objects in each column. So how many do I have in each column? 3. Right. So I'm going to, on these lines, 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. And my total is 15. And I know that because I know it off the top of my head. But if you needed to count, you can count on each number in the columns, or you can skip count, right? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. And that brings us to our sum. Okay, that's for our columns. Now, remember rows. Go left to right. So circle, draw a circle around each row like that. 1, 2, 3. Then off to the side, I'm going to write how many I have in each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 5, 5. And if it's an array, then it's going to be equal. Okay, then each of your rows and your columns are going to have the same amount of objects or manipulatives. You're never going to have 4 columns with 3 manipulatives and a 5th column with 4. That's never going to happen in an array. Okay, so down here for our equation, what do I got to write on my lines? 5 plus 5 plus 5 equals 15. Again, count on if you cannot skip count, but if you can, skip count. 5, 10, 15, and that brings us to the sum. And if you did it correctly, both of your sums are going to be the same, 15 and 15. All right, guys, get going with your work on page 65.